I want to talk about codependency because I think most of us wouldn't like openly identify as being codependent. Like we think of a codependent person as like a hyper, super people pleaser, no sense of boundaries, no sense of self. However, a lot of us, including myself, I recognize had codependent tendencies, especially that's the way a lot of us women have been taught to relate.
Right.
We were taught that a relationship is dependence on a man. And even men have been taught a relationship is to provide for her, which are these kind of like archaic structures of financial bondage, which was what marriage was based on. And now, even though it's not like that, we're still kind of operating from that in the back burner of like, yeah, we want true sacred union, conscious love, but there's still a lot of codependency there. So can you share, first of all, like how would you define codependency and how can we recognize that?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful point in time because a lot of us are excavating old world relational skills, which marriage, you alluded to that marriage was not about love, mostly historically. And there's a book by Stephanie Coontz called The History of Marriage. And she essentially breaks it down that like really marriage was about getting more in-laws. So we use the skills that we needed to keep that type of relationship together are not the skills that are going to allow a relationship that's about mutual liberation, mutual expansion to come alive, especially if I'm afraid if you as a woman, if I'm in a relationship with a woman and I'm afraid that if she develops her voice, she becomes powerful, I might lose her. Okay, well then let's keep this same power dynamic where relationships were really structured more around male needs and you actually being too much, too needy, too whatever is actually a great narrative because then you won't use your voice and you won't leave me. So codependency we define in the book as any relational dynamic where we source safety from something or someone at the expense of our own needs, our own sense of well-being, and through that, the really key words are at the expense of. So I think most people can relate, even if you're, in the pattern that we're talking about, where maybe the woman is raised to take care of everybody and forget about her dreams and her passions, etc. And then you have the other person in the relationship who is the provider. There's still a sense of self-abandonment in both. Because even if I'm the provider, but I'm not, maybe I'm staying in a job I hate. Maybe I feel like there's not a lot of emotional safety in the relationship and there's not space for me to be anything but the person who pays the bills. There can still be a sense of self-abandonment. We don't tend to see it on the other side. We think of codependency generally, the term was popularized years ago on the idea of being in a relationship with an addict. So that's where it really came from, because a lot of people in relationship with addicts, it is all about the other person. So really, when you look at where this behavior comes from, it's usually when we're kids, not just culturally and from movies and everything we learn, these romantic stories, quote unquote, or like the famous Jerry Maguire line, "You complete me," which everyone romanticized that line. And I remember thinking, like, I got to take notes. That's a good one. Like, I'm going to drop that, and we're like, "You complete me." That's not hot. If I said that to you now, you'd be like, "I want to complete you. Like, complete yourself."
And I'd be like, red flag.
Yeah, red flag. "I need you. You can never leave me" is such, now we'd all be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah. Like, I need to have
that's like every song. Yeah.
Right. And you think about, actually, it sounds unromantic, but what a beautiful thing to be like, my happiness is actually not dependent on you. However, our relationship actually contributes to my well-being. Mm-hmm. I'm still great. And if we broke up, that would be devastating for me, but I'd be okay. And there's actually something that's incredibly liberating about that. It doesn't sound romantic. If that was your wedding vow, no one in the audience would be like, "I'm sorry, what?" Unless someone has lost themselves in relationship, forgotten about themselves. The most common thing I see I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of comments and questions is, how do I, really what it comes down to is, if it's through a breakup, I forgot about me, I forgot about what I wanted, I forgot about my dreams. We often pursue all those things when we break up. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, what happens if we created relationships that the actual purpose of the relationship is for both people to come alive? For both people to step into their healing, their voice, their potential, that actually through the material that is created in the friction of our relationships. And this can be done as a single person. This can happen through the way you date, like turning dating into this adventure of like what comes up for me. We actually think when we're dating and we get triggered that there's something wrong with us that we got triggered, but it's actually material that's being asked to work with, and we're like, wow, that I thought I had that figured out. That person didn't text me back and now I'm cascading. And it's like, what a gift. Mm-hmm. Like what a gift, because you still need to learn that there's something about someone replying to you that is correlated to your self-worth and your value. And if you keep pursuing people who don't reply to you, that is coming from a place of believing you're not valuable. And so you start to take pieces of yourself back. And I know this will resonate with you because of the way that you see the world in your work, is that I think about it, my wife and I do, that like what a gift it is that your lineage is trusting you with this. That like maybe for the first time, you're the one who's like, there's some bags that I'm not interested in anymore. And maybe I gave some to my kids. I'll take a few of those back. That like, what a gift that is to think about. So it's called codependency, but it's really, like what are the frictions that we're experiencing in our relationships and how do we forget about ourselves in these experiences?
Yeah, it's crazy how you don't recognize how much of this is ancestral. I didn't recognize until my divorce how much the story of betrayal as, especially for a woman was seen as a commodity, in like Middle Eastern culture, as well as in many Indian, African cultures, a woman is like a trophy that like your rank in society gets a certain youth and beauty of women. So youth and beauty is what you have for a man's money, protectorship, status in society. And it's like a trade-off. Mm-hmm. And, I was sharing with you that my grandmother was 11 years old when she married my grandfather, who was 27. And my great-grandmother was 10 years old, married my great-grandfather, who's 40-something years old. And, and beyond that, they had multiple wives even then in the Middle East. And the way that, like, for me, I'm like, oh, that's so crazy. But that's not even that long ago. Like, that's my dad's mom.
Right.
Like, that is freaking crazy. And then to think, oh, well, that has nothing to do with me. And it's like, even if I was born and raised in the United States, it's still in my lineage and in my programming. And I even recognized through like doing deep healing work that there was this like underlying resentment within me that for us women, we always have to sacrifice. We always have to give. Our wombs are this commodity to birth the child of this man who's like really only for his lineage to continue on, for him to have access to more land and resources. And you're just this tool for him. And that resentment for me that I was subconsciously holding on to actually had me want closeness, but also not.
Right.
Of
sense.
Like, oh, I want you here, but not too close because I secretly am actually holding on to this resentment. And it actually wasn't until I told you I sat with MDMA therapy that allowed me to see that it was almost like this hatred in my heart that was like a black tar over my heart. So that black tar didn't let me to fully feel. So if my ex was distant or separate to me, I would go into what I do wrong. And then I was like, you know what? I can't fully emotionally regulate with this person. So let me just like focus on my own thing. And that's kind of what our society tells us to do. That's their thing and your thing. But I think in true conscious relationship, it's, taking ownership that we all have to do our own deep inner healing work. But also we do bring on all of these patterns that is going to affect the other person, especially if you're living together and creating a life together.